Yeah. So, okay, thanks very much for agreeing to.
Okay.
Forward to hearing.
I'm Kent Shaw with Isaac Walton, lead of Miracle Rockaway chapter. And we've had a drone program since about 21. And what I'm going to do tonight is just cover what are the legal requirements and everything to running a drone. And advance one more. Okay. Okay, this is what we're going to cover. Give you just one slide on our drone program. We're going to talk about the FAA's registration requirement for a drone. Insurance was a big deal whenever we started our program. Our board wanted to make sure that we were covered for liability. So I got one slide on that. Then we're going to get into the FAA and Maryland state rules for flying drones. One of our pre-flight checklists that we use, one of our weather requirements slides, and then we're going to get into a lot on operations near an airport, how to make sure you're not going to get into legal trouble when you fly in a particular place. And I'll probably throw out a bunch of Apple iPads and everything that we use, which are really good. And let's see, then we're going to talk about obtaining authorization to fly. There's a lot of airspace right near airports and so forth. And you have to actually get a clearance. And in fact, AJ may be able to give you a description of what he went through when getting a clearance to fly down near DC. It's very restricted airspace.
Took it out here, flying out here, just took that first.
You mean in the SIP?
In the fall. So the FRC.
Whoa.
15, right?
Yep.
Into 15, but not within 7. I got a brief I was going for one of these meetings. I could go through all that it takes to get outside of 7 and within 15. Forget about 7.
Then I got a couple of slides on, if you're interested in getting your Part 107 drone license, what's required, what's the process. And then there was some new FAA drone rules for 2021. We'll go over some of those. And if you want to skip to the next slide. Okay. Our program started in April of 21, right after I got my remote pilot's license. And we had another person in the chapter that also was had the Part 107 license. And so we set it up. AJ joined us about a year later. And he's also Part 107, former Air Force pilot. And, so next slide. Okay, there's a registration requirement if you have a drone that is over 250 grams. You have to get it registered. There's 2 ways to get it registered. If you're a Part 107, then you've got to go into with the same process, but you go into this, indicate you're a Part 107, and each drone has to be registered with the FAA. You have to put a sticker on your drone that's visible with your registration number, kind of like an aircraft tail number. And I also recommend that you put your phone number on it, because I've heard a lot of people finding the drone and say, well, I don't know how to get it back. It either has no registration or it may have a registration. And how do you track it down with that registration number to get back to the owner? So next slide. Okay. Here's what we found on the insurance. For liability insurance, if you're a recreational pilot, just join the Academy of Model Aeronautics. I think it's $50 a year, and they include some really great liability protection insurance. They've got two categories of membership. There's a full membership, and that's more expensive than the park pilot membership. And there's differing values on the coverage. If you buy a DJI drone, DJI has a care refresh insurance program. You have to purchase that when you first buy the drone, and it is, you can get it up to 1 year or 2 years, and it covers so many replacements. If you can crash into a tree and it needs to be repaired, they'll cover it. They'll cover up to 2 times on a particular policy. You have to turn the drone back in. It's the light underwater or something, you know, they're not going to send you a new one. Now, State Farm drone insurance will do that. Say, hey, I lost my drone, and they will cover it. That may drive up your homeowner's insurance. I don't know exactly. I've never tried that. And then if you want to get legal representation insurance, you can get that from Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They mainly cater that to pilots, commercial pilots and private pilots, but they also have a subcategory for drones, and that's covered as well. But, next slide. Yes.
What is park pilot membership?
If you join the Academy of Model Aeronautics, it'll pop up and ask what category membership you want. And the park pilot membership, I think, is $35, and I think the other one's $50. And it's just different amounts on the insurance. The insurance does not cover commercial use. If you're Part 107, don't expect this to do much for you.
It won't do anything for you if you don't have a commercial flight.
Okay, now we're going to get into the FAA Maryland rules. The FAA, they came out with a Part 107, and that's in Title 14, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 107. And that's the primary law for drones. They came out with it, and there's a lot of complaints about it, requiring that you have a Part 107 license before you can even fly. And next slide. So Congress created an exception to the Part 107, and that's 49 USC Section 44809. And that allows you to fly without a license if you're strictly flying for recreation purposes. Now, there's a lot of confusion on that. A lot of it, you'll hear this even from licensed Part 107, that as long as you're not flying, or as long as you're not getting money for your use of your drone, you don't need it. That's not true. If you look at the fine print on what the FAA says, even if your neighbor, says, "Hey, I lost my dog," and you fly your drone over and help me find it, technically that requires a Part 107 license because it's not purely recreation. Okay, next slide. Maryland is really progressive in terms of legislation of drones. The only thing their law requires, it actually prevents local regulation pertaining to drones. So the counties and the local cities are not supposed to have rules barring you from using drones. It's what they call a preemption clause. Is that actually? Well, actually, I have seen attempts by some of the local parks, even in Montgomery County, trying to put out rules. You can't fly on this park, when technically the state law permits you to do that. So it's but and it has a has one section on the bottom that says, make sure you fly under Part 107 rules. You fly safely, but we're not going to put our own rules on top of that. So, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Now I think there's about 15 rules and everything under Part 107. So some of those. First two rules requires that your drone be registered and that you have a Part 107 license, or you are working under somebody with a Part 107 license. And okay, C requires you to do a pre-inspection of the drone. Make sure it's airworthy before you fly it. You're looking for your batteries. Making sure they don't have cracks on them. Make sure the props aren't broken or have cracks on them. Look at the battery pack. If it's bulging, that's it could be a fire risk. So just look at that. Let's see. And then you're required not to have a physical or mental condition that could affect the flight. And they don't really go into a lot of specifics. But, I'm presuming you're not on prescription drugs and that sort of thing. Maybe
in the Part 107 exam, there's a lot. It's almost like you are treated by the FAA as a pilot, and therefore any alcohol, can't drink alcohol. I think it's 6 hours. Can't remember the exact time.
No, it's 8 hours.
Is it 8 for
the 8 to bottom of the throttle?
Yeah, 12 normal. There are a lot of them. They adjusted it for drone flying, but it's still, you're kind of treated as a pilot.
Yeah. Next slide. Okay, remote pilot and command has to be designated before the flight, and that person is directly responsible for the flight. So if it goes into DC airspace inadvertently, they're hooked. Let's see. And F is kind of typical of all the FAA rules. They've got an emergency cop out. So if you have an emergency, you can violate the rules to get around the emergency conditions. And G is kind of a catch-all. You can't operate in a careless or reckless manner. You can't drop items from unmanned aircraft that creates a hazard. I know some people that have dropped fishing lines and that sort of thing. That's not really a risk. But let's see.
You can't fly a drone from an airplane.
Right.
No.
Okay. And next slide. Okay. This is one we talked about before. Drugs and alcohol. Those are the rules. The alcohol limit is way lower than driving. It's 0.04, and I think in most states are 0.08. And then they have the 8-hour rule. You can't fly if you've had alcohol within 8 hours. And J, all flights are to be daylight only. They changed that somewhat, and we'll cover the new rules a little later on. And you're required to keep your drone within visual line of sight. And sometimes you'll have a visual observer appointed, and they will help you, especially if you've got an FPV drone and you've got goggles on, you can't see behind you. And if you've got an observer, watching for other aircraft, or you're about to run into that tree over there or something like that, then that's very helpful. And there's a limit of 1 drone per remote pilot operator. and visual observer. The visual observer can't, if you got two out there, you can't have one person do it all. Can't carry hazardous material. And next slide. Okay, all flights yield right away to other aircraft. May not operate over any persons not directly operating in the operation, not under a covered structure, not inside a covered stationary vehicle. And let's see, flights, yes.
So when I see on YouTube people flying drones in the gym or something like that.
Indoors, I really haven't looked at it. I doubt if that's a problem if it's indoors. If it, a certain weight.
Not under a covered structure.
Well, as an example, in Isaac Walton, we fly at our lake a lot of times, and we have a pavilion and open sides, and people sit out there and have picnics, and you couldn't run the drone over them.
That is a confusing stipulation because I've tried to peel that back a little bit to figure out if everybody is notified, like you're doing like a wedding. Say you were taking pictures at a wedding, and you told everybody, hey, we're going to be flying a drone. Can you do it? And sometimes it falls under the Mother Mary rule. It's much easier to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission, kind of thing. But
I think there's a clause that says if it's in a contained area that has restricted access, and all the participants within the restricted area are aware of the operation, then you can proceed and fly over it. As long as people who aren't aware of it can't enter your access. But like in a movie set where you basically have a fence that prevents some straight.
See, no person can operate in a prohibited or restricted area. We'll talk about those a little more. Then all flights require a pre-flight inspection by the remote pilot command. I think I skipped over Q. If you're near an airport, you can't interfere with flight operations. That's logical, right? Next slide. And drone operators may not exceed a maximum altitude of 400 feet above ground level. And that's often determined by where you take off from, because if you're on a tilted terrain and you fly up the valley, then it's 400 feet from that level.
it's also 400 feet if you're flying over town. Let's say you're asked to inspect something, or it's 400 feet further for that obstacle, so much higher.
And then the other one's a catch-all, and I haven't really seen it as a CFR, but never interfere with emergency response activities. I think that was triggered. I think they were dropping water or something, some forest fires over on the West Coast, and somebody was out there, flying a drone, and the helicopter pilots refused to go in there and continue dropping water. So that's, and they've done the same thing at the collapse of the bridge up in Baltimore just happened. They barred anybody from flying drones over that while the rescue operations and so forth. Okay, next slide. And this is an example of the checklist that we came up with for pre-flight. We check the weather, make sure everybody has licenses. We have a first aid kit, and a fire extinguisher. A lot of the drones have the lithium batteries, and they can cause a fire, sometimes overcharging, sometimes if they hit something, you trigger something. So it's good to have a fire extinguisher with you. We assign visual observers, make sure everybody has their certificate and license. Verify that everybody's batteries are fully charged and locked in securely. There's been a lot of instances where the batteries haven't been locked in, and they will come in loose, and then of course it's going down, and you're not going to have control over it. And a lot of the drones with the GPSs, they will pop up on the screen and tell you the compass needs to be calibrated, and that's what we look for. Okay, next slide. No, that's pretty much everything.
There's not not that I'm aware of, there's not an FAA, they just state as part of the Part 107 is that you are to run pre-flight and have some sense of a maintenance program. What that constitutes, don't know, but it's a pretty good list here of items. Yes, it's ours, but you know, it covers the C6. What's that?
I've seen longer lists. Initial list?
FAA does not have it.
Yeah, it just tells you to do one, and I think it mentions 2 or 3 things to check, and that's the extent of it. But next slide. Okay, weather requirements. Again, these are our weather requirements. The FAA doesn't require the 3 statute miles visibility, but that's 3 miles is considered visual flight rules, weather, and so that's why we picked that as a reason. Now they have some limits on how far you can fly from clouds as part of the instructions.
It's a pretty low ceiling. It's 400 feet.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, I can say. In fact, we've got a lot of video links in here, and we don't have enough time to really go through them, but you can go through them at home and kind of learn some things. Well, even that, if you're flying a drone, water on those motors, and that's cause a lot of issues.
Our own battery, how to use that.
Yes.
Water.
Yeah. And let's see. Now, our initial slides was based on the fact that we fly right underneath the Montgomery County Air Park, and I'll kind of skip over those to a certain extent, since you guys aren't going to necessarily be up in there. But if you were, you would you could use an aviation radio, listen to their official weather, and you can also listen to pilot communications and see what they're doing. Next slide. This is a great app. It's called UAV Forecast. The app is free. You can use it. I think it's an Android version as well as an Apple version. And I say it's free because it's free for up to 2 days. If you want to forecast beyond 2 days, up to 7 days, then I think there's a small fee on it. And you can change the parameters here. If you've got we've got one drone, the Tello drone, which we fly, and maximum wind on that is about 3 knots. And of course, if you've got a DJI drone or something like that, those are good for 29 knots or so. Next slide. I'm going to get into a little bit of airspace. Now, the FAA requires you to get a clearance if you're flying in Class B airspace, Class C, Class D, or what they call Class E2. And a Class B airspace is for the larger airports. We've got National, we've got Dulles, we've got BWI, and we've got Andrews. And those are considered Class B airspace in our local area. Class C, we do not have any Class C airports in Maryland, but you do in Virginia. I think Richmond, Norfolk, some of those are Class C. Class D, there's plenty of those. Easton, Salisbury, Martinsburg. Those would be Class D. The B, C, and D, they would have a control tower, and that would, it would also show you in the airport facilities director what class airspace each one of these have. Now the Class E2, apparently, and I've never seen one, but the FAA has certain uncontrolled airports whose airspace goes all the way down to the ground, and that's the one that you need clearance for. Most of them start at 700 feet and go up, and so you could really fly underneath the traffic on those without getting an authorization to do that. Okay, next slide. Now this, let's see if I can. I don't know. Oh, there it is. Yeah. FAA sectionals chart, and you see this ring right around here. That's a special flight rules area for the DC, and they created that after the 9/11. They've also got a separate circle right in here, which is called the flight restricted zone, and for drones, it's called the no-fly zone. Next slide. Okay, this is a close up of the flight restricted zone, includes centers around National, and over here's the Dulles airspace. We've got Andrews down here, right below there. And, to fly a plane in there, you have to either be on an instrument flight rules, or you have to go through the TSA security background investigation. And I've done that. You got to be fingerprinted, and you got to go through an orientation. They will give you a secret PIN number. You can't file your flight plan online. You have to physically call somebody up and define your flight plan. Next slide.
Is that the same as for College Park?
Yeah, College Park is there. It's right there. Now this is it's kind of the same circle of the flight restricted zone, except they call it the DC drone no-fly zone. And this goes way up here north Bethesda. We are probably in a no-fly zone here, in Rockville.
But that circle,
This is-
cover up,
That's it.
and this circle doesn't seem to cover this.
It's north,
It's north of-
actually, no,
Kind of like right on the line.
you're right on the.
Yeah.
Strictly speaking, based on this literal map, we're in the clear based.
Okay. Okay.
But we're very close to the line.
Yeah,
You know how you know if you're inside or not? Your drone is gonna tell you. Why? Because it will not let you take off. Unless you build your own.
Or the DJI drones. Now, here's some other areas to avoid. There's temporary flight restricted areas. If there's a football game in town, or a race car event, theme parks, Disney, they will put out a flight restricted area, and you can't fly in those. correctional facilities, and we've got a few of those around us. You can't fly cigarettes over and drop them into the park and everything, or the yard for all the prisoners. Wildlife refuges, it's 2,000 feet above ground level, and of course, we're only allowed to go up 400 feet above ground level, so you can't fly there. Forest fires, we talked about that a little bit. National parks, you can't fly in those. Maryland state parks are okay. The rules say that for Maryland state parks, you're supposed to go advise the park administrator that you're going to be flying drones. And supposedly it's not a permission type thing, but you're just advising them. Sometimes they will suggest better places for you to fly. And I would just go ahead and cooperate with them if they suggest that. VIP travel. I was in Ocean City one time. I think Biden was down in Rehoboth. And you couldn't fly anywhere around there. Prohibited areas. It's one in Camp David, of course. Right around the White House, of course. Of course, that's in the red zone anyway. DOD facilities, military bases, you probably can't. I know going to Quantico, they've got signs up there saying you can't photograph anything on base. They're restricted. Restricted areas may be able to, depending on their hours. For example, if you go in the Tangier Island and everything, they turn that flight restricted zone on and off. And if they're not practicing with jets out there doing bombing runs, then it's not gonna be a flight restricted area at that point. So be sure to check. Military operations area is okay. You still got to watch that altitude and that sort of thing, not interfere with traffic. Kind of a catch-all. Around here, we have a lot of buildings with really small windows and that sort of thing, dark out. And a lot of times you fly your drone there, even though it's not showing as a restricted area, you may have an encounter with a lot of the security people. Next. Now, the FAA came out with this app. This is another app you'd really need. It's before you fly. And what it does, it takes your GPS on your phone, recognizes where you are, and it shows all of the flight restricted parts that you need to think about before flying there. And
So that happens.
yes, no, it has retired as of before you fly, but the FAA now has about 4 or 5 vendors that they say you can use that offer this service, and they work about the same way. But you have to, go into the Apple, look for before you fly, and it'll tell you what to do, where to find that.
Airloft has got merged with Before You Fly. So if you look up Airloft, you'll find the app, but that's not the only one that does lands. There's like 3 or 4 of them that support lands coordination.
Well, of course, this is why I go to that SWAT line.
Okay.
I live just north of Dulles Airport.
Okay.
Okay, 10 miles. I'm probably in some kind of issue. But if I use Before You Fly, it gives me permission to fly there.
But yeah, the Before You Fly is now integrated with Lance in all these new apps.
Lance, just so you know, Lance is for controlled airspace. The fact that you are 10 miles from Dulles, you're in essence around Class B airspace of Dulles. Does not mean you're within, because Class B, B for big, is like an upside down wedding cake. And so it tears, it necks itself down as the closer you get to the airport. 10 miles away, you might have an altitude block where you're Class G and you're good to go. And so
Planes fly, other than planes basically parks right over my apartment. And with another app, I can see they're 1,200 feet. Because they're 1,200 feet, I figure I can fly 400. I don't do it there.
But you still want to get a clearance just to stay on the
the
safe side.
Lance Apple, it's got a grade. It,
Because it asks, how long am I gonna be flying? Asking these questions. So I'm assuming it's giving me permission to fly there. For
It
a
will,
lot of
when-
time.
when you put your location and time frame and all that, if it is considered controlled airspace, it will, first off, there's a grid there. As you go there and you put your location, you could see what altitude block. You know, it might be 400 feet AGL, might be 200 feet AGL, 100 feet AGL. It depends. But, you know, if you put the information, it's pretty instantaneous whether it approved you or not.
I can just- I haven't, flown at the parking lot of Dulles, but, but where I live and another county park, which comes close to Leesburg, I fly there, just right in my package.
It also depends on the orientation of the runway. So if the runway is like this, and the airspace is more restricted, approach. So you can be opposite, pretty close.
I'm right on.
Yeah, in fact, I've got a note,
Run back
next
in the
slide goes
I'm
into that.
big dude. The family ready.
The next slide.
Oh, by the way, can you go back one?
Oh, sure.
This DJI Safe Flight GeoZone map, the GeoZone, that's the DJI Mother May I. That thing, if your drone isn't taking off, it's because the GeoZone within your drone is saying you're in an area where you cannot fly without, not Lance. Lance does not, that's not that. That goes beyond.
Have that. Before you fly, I have DJI 83 Pro. And if I don't do it before you fly, then I won't fly.
Yeah.
If I do it before you fly, it's good.
Yeah, I don't have a DJI, I mean, I think that the AFC championship guy, that he told the police that he always just does whatever the DJI app says. For whatever reason, that day, even though it was TFR thing, he told him he could fly.
Yeah.
And that's what his excuse was for all that, so just, I don't know if that covers everything, I used it, but I saw that, and that's.
It is ultimately your responsibility, regardless of what your app says. This is for if you go and you go, take off, and it ain't taking off, it's because your controller says, I'm in a location where I'm not supposed to allow you to fly without you going into the safe flight and providing proof, which gets uploaded to DJI. They look at what you have in terms of clearance and proof. You send documentation, and then that will send you a code, and then you put that code into your controller, and then it unlocks it.
TFRs override everything, because they can.
Yeah.
issue-
Yes, anytime.
Yeah, they'll never get into.
Yeah, before you fly, we'll show you the TFRs. Now, this DJI grid's probably not going to. And so don't fall into that trap. Always use that before you fly and see if you're going to need a clearance that day or not.
You can sign up for FAA safety. They'll say you need, there's a TFR in your area. Give you some. Sure.
Okay, this is, I think we talked about that. Now, before Lance came along, you had to actually call the airport manager, say, hey, I want to fly my drone through there. And, of course, the airport manager his primary concern is landing aircraft safely, and you're kind of at the bottom of this priority list. And you may hear back in a couple of weeks. He may give you a specific date and time. And if it's raining that day, you get to start the process all over. Now, the Lance is just an incredible thing. I think the FAA did a really good job by implementing this. I've got some videos on how to use that, and you can drill down in there if you want to learn more about that.
Can you give me half a second? Oops. Thank you.
Okay, here's the grid that we were talking about. And I don't know if you can see it from way back in the back, but right along here are all zeros. Now, all zeros mean that you're not going to get authorization for flying there. That's the runway probably goes this direction. Another one up here with the zero, that may be where the tower is. And if you'll look, the closer you get to this, the lower you can fly legally. And that's what Lance does. If you tell it where you're going to be flying from, it'll locate that grid. It says, okay, you're good for up to 400 feet. Now, if you say you're going to be flying right in this area, it's going to pick out the lowest altitude. Say, okay, for that whole area, you're limited to 200 feet above ground level. This is actually an FAA authorization to fly. It's kind of short. We can go through that if you want. Sure. Click. Should be able to click.
Might be because of that. I'm not sure it's only 7, but. Cannot play media. Just saw that.
Okay. All right.
Denied.
There's a previous slide.
Sorry.
Skip over that.
All right. That's I was just trying.
This is some information on what can happen if you don't verify that it's good. You're good to fly. Apparently, this guy decided to fly a drone over the Super Bowl, and obviously didn't check the before you fly, and they were looking into criminal charges for this. Maybe he could plead it out. I don't know.
There's a more recent one, Philadelphia YouTuber creator, violated all kinds of stuff continually. They warned him. I think they fined him $180,000. I think that's what it was. But he was an idiot.
Next.
So it doesn't have a nice future.
A lot of people don't know about this NASA form. If you're ever taking any flying lessons, your flight instructors can get you offline and tell you about this. I call it a get out of jail free card, and it's kind of a loophole. Well, suppose the FAA comes out and sees you flying a drone and say, "You're flying a little high, aren't you?" And you say, "Oh no, I'm staying right at 400 feet." Now, he can go back and actually see how high you were, and he could very well, start an issue with you, challenging, you with a violation. Now, many years ago, they started an aviation safety reporting system, but there was concern that to have the FAA operate that would create a conflict of interest. So they handed this system over to NASA. So you can file safety reports on this NASA form, and they cannot be used in any action against you. And a lot of times if you're flying and they clear you for runway 11 right, and you land on 11 left, and they ask you to call the tower, they're not going to tell you that we're going after your license or going after you for a violation. But if you're smart, you'll file this thing, maybe get out of it. But, next. Okay, you got to yield to other aircraft when there's a conflict with a manned aircraft. Visual observation, monitoring airport common frequencies, and using ADS-B displays. I don't know if you're familiar with the ADS-B displays or not, but all the airplanes in this area will have ADS-B. And ADS-B is supposed to be a system that eventually will replace the radar system. Each airplane transmits its physical location, and you can derive which direction it's going and what altitude it's at. And you can build an ASB receiver out of a Raspberry Pi, and they call that a Stratix. I've built about 4 or 5 of them and everything. They work great. You can put the whole thing together for about $150, $175, or you can get a commercial one, spend $700 to $800, and it does the same thing. Next.
This doesn't include ultralights though. So if you're flying your drone and you hear a noise up there,
yeah,
there could be someone, a PPG
yeah,
person, or an ultralight person that doesn't show up.
Yeah, well, there's some planes that are exempt from it, so forth. So you still got to be really cautious. I'm going to skip over this. This is primarily for up at Montgomery County Airport. How to,
If you're trying to get your 107, you're going to have to learn how aircraft operate in control pattern.
And here's a picture of Montgomery County Airport from the air, if you haven't seen one before. Okay, this gets into, this is the receiver that I told you about. And there's plans on the internet how to do it. You can just order the parts and put it together. It's fairly easy to do. They're really incredible little devices.
And it'll transmit to your phone or your tablet.
Yeah, and it'll display it. If you've ever used FlightAware, it gives you the same kind of information. It'll show you the map, and it'll show you where all the planes are and how high they are, which direction you're going. But requirements for the report for the Part 107 license. Okay, you got to be at least 16 years old. You got to be able to read, speak, write, and understand English. You have to be in physical and mental condition to safely fly a drone. There's no medical checkup and that sort of thing. So they're basing that on your assertions. And you've got to pass this initial aeronautical knowledge exam.
How many people here at Part 107s?
You can be a glider pilot at 15.
Oh, okay.
So you can fly a real aircraft younger than you could fly a drone.
Wow, good thing.
15 for gliders.
Okay, here's the required steps if you're interested. You got to go and get what they call an FAA tracking number online, and you can use this same number if you want to go for a private pilot or commercial pilot's license. You can.
Oh,
It's the
that was
same setup.
That was for part 107. To register a drone, it's 12, 13. So at 13, you can register a drone and fly into recreational. Whereas part 107 is really meant for commercial flying. It is the commercial card for drones.
And then you schedule an appointment to take the test at what they call a knowledge testing center. Closest one to us is Washington International Flight Academy out of Stone County Airport.
If you're military, it's free and you can get it on base. Ex-military or retired military.
And then you have to pass the aeronautical knowledge test. And this is some of the areas that they will test you on. It's almost like ground school for a private pilot, except not as in depth in a lot of areas.
But a lot more in depth than I thought going through. Surprisingly.
All right, then you fill out this application, form 8710-13 for the rating. And let's see. It says you can sign it digitally. They'll send you a confirmation email. They do a TSA background check on you behind the scenes. They don't necessarily tell you that they're doing one. See, then they'll send you the license in the mail.
What's great is sites like Udemy. You can get online training. You can look up part 107 and you can, I think I took one was like $15 or something. Watch it many times. I watched it through like 3 or 4 times. Did a really good job of prepping me for the exam. They'll have practice exams within it. But it's still, I know you think it's pretty easy. I didn't think it was that easy of an exam. It took a lot of time to go through weather, reading METARs and stuff like that. But it's, in terms of when you get done with it, it's an accomplishment. You really feel like you learned a lot by doing it. So you can look up one of those part 107 courses and take it, just take it multiple times.
I can give a plug for remotepilot101.com. That's it.
Oh, Jason.
Yeah,
Jason Shepard, yeah.
yeah. It's a good course, a little bit more expensive than that box.
Yeah.
He does a great job with the videos, sample questions.
Now we were given. I know Jason. I know him pretty well. Every time I'm down at Sun Fun or something, I drop by his booth. But he's offered us a 30% discount on the training for the Part 107 license, and I can check with him and see if he have any issues with giving you guys the same discount. And if he approves it, then I'll give you the code that you enter whenever you sign up for the training. Okay, next. Here's some new rules for 2021.
2 years, and the first, you have to take the test in a location, physical location, pass the exam. On your renewal, it's an online refresher exam. So haven't done that yet, but I think it'll hopefully be much easier just to take refreshers every 2 years to renew it.
I've done it
2 years.
I've done it a couple times. They make you go through an online series of education and videos. then at the end, you take the test, and you gotta get some reasonable score, like 70%. And it's free to be taken.
Yeah.
Take it again, but if you fail, it can be.
If it's like a private pilot, it doesn't expire. It never expires. You
Right,
just,
the license does not expire.
the license doesn't, you just need your biannual flight
Yeah.
review.
Yeah.
Kind of
It's
thing.
kind of the same thing. Starting this year, they slipped a little bit on the date. Because a lot of the manufacturers and everything wasn't, like, they didn't have the remote ID capability. They thought they were going to meet the deadline, they didn't, so the FAA is letting it slip a little bit. But there's a requirement for a remote ID.
Just one, yeah.
March 16, 15, done.
You guys found a good module yet? A couple of on your drones.
Yeah, if it's under 250 grams, if you get like the DJI Mini, it's 1 gram lower. It's kind of a loophole.
Even if you're flying Part 7, still need to be under.
Yes.
I was looking at this, I'll share with you guys, just read this yesterday. Holy stuff, base one, it's 14 grams, $90 on Amazon, fully dock certified with the FAA. Seems like a pretty good self-contained module. Charge it. Program, stick it.
Yeah.
So 14 grams, so happens. People can fly big problems. Like, I mentor a high school team across the street, you go alone, drug competitions, you 4 pounds.
The registration process for registering drones is not really that cumbersome. I mean, there's a little cost to it, but now, is there, I just out of curiosity, people worry about, what is it about registration that concerns people? I was just wondering if there's anything that,
I actually have all my lists. Just making sure there's the general.
One thing I forgot to point out, if you do a Google search on drone registration, you will get a lot of vendors pop up, and they will do it for you for $30 rather than $5 that the FAA charges. So watch out for that. I wouldn't call it a scam. I mean, they'll give you the sticker that goes with it, but it's a scam.
Even if you don't have to register, I think you still have to do that trust exam.
yes.
Yeah,
For recreational.
Super easy one. Yeah. You're supposed to have your certificate available.
Yes.
In case someone says, hey.
So I always wondered, like, if I'm training or teaching a friend or a family member, everyone should trust that.
You're not supposed to be flying a drone unless you've taken the trust course now.
However, I wonder if that's the same thing with like Part 107, because you can, as a Part 107 pilot, you can have somebody who's not Part 107 flying, but they are under your direct supervision. I think the same thing would be if you were trust and you had somebody there under your direct supervision. I think that's
Oh, like a kid or something. Yeah.
if somebody comes up, grab the controller from them quickly.
Now, night flights are now permitted after you complete some training. And if you're a Part 107 and you take the recurring training, then that is supposed to meet that requirement.
However, within the SFR, which includes the FRZ, that's your 30-mile ring around here, no night flying. So 30 miles from the DC VOR for night flying.
Yeah, next slide. Let's see. flying over people in cars is now permitted, but the FAA has developed a risk assessment structure, divided all the drones up into 4 or 5 categories. They won't tell you which category your drone is yet, but if it has so much kinetic energy, then it's different requirements. A lot of the requirements require the guards around the propellers, and maybe some other one. I think that's the big one. And then we've already talked about the rules for retesting. It's now you can do the online training instead. And we're talking about the trust here, testing. The new law requires that everybody passes this aeronautical knowledge and safety test, trust. And there's some information on that, which we can't see. And that's it. That's all I got.